Oh boy, I'm going to talk about climate change. I can't believe I'm actually going to do this, and I may get myself kicked off of Twitter or uh, sent to a gulag. I'm entitling this excerpt or this episode Weather-Related Gulag. A gulag, by the way, from the old Soviet Union, was a place where you would be sent if you needed re-education. And the good thing about being sent to a gulag is usually you didn't live to return, so that if you weren't re-educated, there's really no great loss there because you didn't come back anyway. I have noticed that people in our society have such a zeal when it comes to shutting down people who aren't resisting necessarily their position, but just want to question things, want to have a broader discussion. There's such a zeal to shut them up that the word gulag in recent days, as I'm making this video, has actually been used. And it seems like some of us are ready to stand up others against the wall and just shoot them. I don't think that's very healthy. I want to say right off on this subject, I have probably less of a carbon footprint than most of you who are looking at this. I had taken in my youth 2 separate vacations to the British Isles where I spent the whole time walking. I walked 600 plus miles in a month. That's over 20 miles a day if you're mathematically challenged. And I kind of adopted that habit in my more routine life back in the States. When I was in grad school in Austin, I didn't have a car. And I was there for several years. I got so unused to driving that I basically had to relearn how to drive when I was about 30. I walked to the grocery store as well as to and from classes. I just walked everywhere. And I was fortunate in being close to my final job before I retired, and I was able to walk to and from that too. So I've worn out a lot of shoe leather avoiding cars. I don't like car culture. I don't like the noise, the tension, the frayed nerves, the racket. It really gives me a headache, literally, to be stuck in city traffic. I'm not even talking now about pollution. I just don't think it's a very healthy way for human beings to live. There's very high reflectivity in our cities because of all the glass and the metal and the tarmac and the concrete and everything. This is all reflecting heat back up into the atmosphere. And yeah, that's one of the facts. When people talk about the changing weather and how it just seems so much hotter in the summer and so forth, a lot of times they're talking about situations like this, which are specific to our urban areas. No, they're not comfortable to live in, and yes, there are ways that we could change that, but this isn't really about climate. It's not about climate at all. If your specific objection is to the way we live in cities, I'm with you on that. I've been on that before a lot of you were born. I've been writing about this for decades. But let me having tried to establish my bona fides as an environmentalist, let me say a little bit about just how complex the subject of climate is. It's, as I just said, it's not weather. If you're noticing that in your lifetime, it seems like it's raining more, it seems like the summers are longer, it seems like it's raining less, that's not climate, because you are not going to live long enough to be aware of climatic change. Climate is something that varies over a period of centuries or even millennia. It's not changing weather. It's not varying weather patterns. So no, your personal life is not gathering evidence of climate change. Sorry. And also, as I was again indicating just a minute ago, climate has to be assessed on a planetary basis. You have to have some way of measuring what's going on uniformly, whether you're in the Arctic or in Tierra del Fuego or up in the tundra north of Canada or in Mongolia. There has to be some way of routinely measuring all around the planet what the weather's like, and this has to go on for really generations, centuries. We, quite frankly, haven't had the method of doing that. There's no way we can go back at every point on the planet and measure what's been happening for all that time. And even in my lifetime, during the Cold War, we couldn't really get guys into places like the Soviet Union and China to, I think we probably still can't in the People's Republic of China to find out just what's going on there. We can't get objective, accurate, routinely distributed information that we need to assess climate. So we're relying on a lot of assumptions that are built into computer models. And can you see why someone might just wish to question some of these results, since the adjustments to our way of life are so radical? 98% of scientists were told over and over again, God, can I say a few things about that? 98% of scientists, just that phrase. What is a scientist? An endocrinologist is a scientist. Why should he know anything about climate? An engineer might know more. Why would a kinesiologist know anything about climate? But he's a scientist, but maybe a landscape painter might know more. A scientist, really? Even a climatologist. I heard Willie Soon, the South Korean scientist, talk about this on a YouTube video a while back. Even if you're a climatologist, you need the help of other scientists, people who study planetary behavior, study the sun, geologists. There are so many specializations that have to contribute to this. There's no one branch of science that can independently probe the depths of a subject as complex as this. And yet the solutions are so simplistic. I don't know if the climate is changing or not. And I'm pretty sure that you don't either. I don't think anyone on earth knows. So, but it does strike me as just an idiot layman as odd that CO2, which is supposed to be the villain in this drama, is about 0.04% of our atmosphere. That's like not quite one half of, my math's not too, 1/2 of 1/10 of 1%. And the man-made contributant to that is like 2% of that. And most of that comes from China and India, who are not interested in adjusting their industrialization patterns to suit the climate change crowd. So here's where I want to end this part of the discussion. I was having this little tennis match with somebody on Twitter, and he wasn't, of course, very happy with me. But this was my final question to him, which he couldn't answer. I think he was honest enough that he realized there's not a good answer to this. If we in the West and the developed world throttle way back on our industrial habit of living, and I wish we could find a way to do that, but if we did, we would be surrendering domination of the world's economy to Red China, to the PRC. Is that what you really want to do? Look at what China's doing right now to the planet. And you want to just give them the green flag, not just to dominate Southeast Asia, but to dictate the way the environment is cared for throughout the whole planet. They're already, PRC has basically taken over Africa. Is that really what you want to do? Because that's what's going to happen if we just bow out and surrender the 21st century to China. Do you, as a responsible environmentalist, do you really want to do that? Now, I'm afraid that a lot of people who are so gung-ho about having centralized government control every aspect of our lives, because otherwise we're not going to be able to get on top of this climate change thing. I'm afraid I'm a skeptic enough to think that they don't really care about the environment and about climate. I think they just want more centralized government. So maybe they're okay with China taking over the world economy and also dictating a lot of our politics and our social habits. That's what really bothers me. At least have the honesty and the courage to come right out and say what it is that you're really promoting. You don't care about climate if your spiel is really all about just having social credits and cameras eavesdropping on our private lives and taking over every aspect of our behavior. Again, I've written about this for decades. I would like to see us actually decentralize and go back to what we had throughout most of human history. Now, we could still be progressive in terms of our national defense, and we could push our technology in other ways, but we don't have to let it into our private lives. We could create multi-purpose communities where people reside, where they go to school, they go to church, and they have their businesses maybe in the bottom floor of their houses. You can still find communities like this in Europe and elsewhere. They're very pleasant places. I mean, we go there to vacation, right? You have Mama Ferrara's Italian restaurant down here on the bottom floor, and she lives up above there, and the kitchen isn't bad. You have somebody who dresses hair, and you have someone who works out of his garage working on cars, and of course you have a lot fewer cars because people can get out and walk. They're healthier, they know each other, they're happier, they know their neighbors, there's less crime because you look out your window and if somebody's doing something wrong, you probably know who that person is. These are just healthier, better communities. Before the car took over the way we design our cities, we were happier, a happier species, and we could get back to that. We could actually use things like the internet to support decentralization. But I'm taking this little excursus because I just want to show you there are solutions that do not involve government intruding with a heavy boot into our lives even more than it already has. If you really care about the environment, then how about putting more power back into the hands of little people like us so that we can just walk about and get to know each other and live at a more natural pace? Why is nobody suggesting that solution? I just have this feeling that when, again, as a retired academic, I'm familiar with this and I've been at the receiving end of it, but I have the feeling that when someone points an epithet like climate change denier, it's supposed to mean that you're such a filthy, loathsome, despicable human being that no one has to treat you like a human being anymore. You can be thrown into a gulag, or you can be dragged out and shot, and no one's going to shed a tear for you because you're just a piece of garbage. This talk about slurs and slanders. Do you, watching this, you really think people deserve to be treated like this just because they're asking questions? Do you really have enough answers that, I got this. I know he's so wrong he just needs to die. Or maybe people who react that way do so because they don't have any real answers and they're afraid of a discussion. You do not want to be one of those people, do you? You don't.